Aquarius, let me ask you something quietly. Have you ever noticed how the people who carry the most weight in life are usually the ones no one checks on? You don't look broken. You don't sound desperate. You still show up. You still function. You still smile. But somewhere inside, you've been living a version of your life that no one else can see. Not failing. Not winning either. Just surviving in silence. And here's the strange part. For reasons you don't even fully understand yet, your life is about to shift in a way that won't make logical sense at first. Not because you forced it, not because you chased it, but because something you carried for years is finally about to release you. If this already feels like it's speaking to you, type "I'm ready" in the comments. Because what's coming next might explain why everything before this had to happen exactly the way it did. Aquarius, I want to stay right here with you for a moment. Not as a voice talking at you, but as someone sitting beside you late at night, when the world is quiet and honest. There's something very specific about the way you've been living. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. No big collapses, no loud failures. Just a long stretch of days where you kept moving, even when you weren't sure why. You learned how to wake up without excitement, how to go through routines without expectation, how to finish tasks while your mind was somewhere else entirely. Not sad, not hopeful either, just suspended. And the strange thing is, most people would never guess how heavy it felt, because you became very good at looking fine. You carried responsibilities quietly. You solved problems without asking for help. You absorbed disappointment without making a scene. Not because you wanted to be strong, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing anyone would really carry it with you. There's a certain kind of tiredness that only comes from being emotionally self-sufficient for too long. Not burnout, not stress. It's more subtle than that. It's the kind where you don't feel exhausted. You just feel empty of momentum. Like you've been walking on a long road with no landmarks, not lost, just unsure if the destination still exists. And sometimes, in very quiet moments, you've probably wondered something like this. If I disappeared from my current life, not in a tragic way, just gently, would anything actually collapse? Would anyone truly feel the space I leave behind? Not because you want to leave, but because you want to matter in a way that feels real. Here's what I notice about you, Aquarius. You've been carrying a future that hasn't arrived yet. And that creates a unique kind of loneliness. You're not grieving the past. You're waiting for something that feels familiar, but hasn't happened. It's like recognizing a song before you've ever heard it. Like missing a place you've never been. Like knowing your life is meant to expand, but not seeing where the door is. And that creates a quiet pressure inside. Not pain. More like a constant internal question. Is this really all there is to me? Or am I just early? Because part of you knows, very deeply, that the way you've been living is not your final form. You didn't come here just to function. You didn't build this level of emotional awareness just to survive. You didn't learn how to sit with yourself in silence for no reason. Those invisible years weren't wasted. They were shaping something in you that doesn't show up on resumes or timelines or social feeds. They were teaching you how to feel your own energy, how to read the emotional weather in a room, how to sense when something is aligned, even if you can't explain why. Most people don't develop that. They distract themselves too quickly. But you stayed. You listened. You learned how to be with your own thoughts without running. And that's why this phase of your life feels so strange right now. Because it's not falling apart. It's not fully opening either. It's that quiet space right before something shifts. The part where nothing changes on the surface, but everything inside is getting ready to move. So let me ask you something, gently. If your life were allowed to become easier, not in a lazy way, but in a supported way, would you even recognize it at first? Or would it feel unfamiliar to finally stop carrying everything alone? Aquarius, there is a kind of unraveling that doesn't look like falling apart. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for attention. It happens quietly, in between ordinary days. One morning you wake up and nothing feels wrong, but nothing feels right either. Your body still moves, your mind still works, yet something inside has gone. Flat. Not broken, just muted. You still laugh at the right moments. You still reply to messages. You still keep promises, but the emotional color has faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. And the most confusing part is this. You can't point to a single reason. No disaster. No heartbreak that everyone knows about. No moment where you can say, this is when it happened. It's more like the slow draining of meaning, the quiet erosion of excitement, the feeling that you are living on the surface of your own life. You don't feel sad enough to ask for help. You don't feel hopeful enough to dream again. So you exist in this in-between space, not drowning, not swimming, just floating. And floating for too long creates a very specific kind of exhaustion. Not the kind that makes you sleep more, the kind that makes you feel disconnected from your own future. You start doing things because you should, not because you want to. You start finishing days without remembering them. Weeks pass without leaving emotional fingerprints. Sometimes you catch yourself staring at nothing, not thinking, not feeling, just empty of narrative. As if your life paused the story, but forgot to press play again. And you might have thought, at some point, maybe this is just adulthood. Maybe this is what stability feels like. Maybe this numbness is the price of being responsible. But deep down, you know that's not true, because this isn't peace. Peace has warmth in it. This feels more like emotional static. It's the nervous system staying alert for too long, always adapting, always managing, never fully resting. There's a subtle grief hidden here, not for something you lost, but for something that hasn't arrived yet. You feel it when you look at your own life and think, is this really the full expression of who I am? You feel it when you imagine starting over, not because you hate your life, but because you crave a version of yourself that feels more alive. And what's strange is, this phase often arrives right before a major internal shift. Not because everything is getting worse, but because the old identity is no longer sustainable. You have outgrown the emotional container you were living in, but the new one hasn't formed yet. So you feel blank, uninspired, suspended between chapters. This is not depression. Depression pulls you downward. This feels more like being held in place, like the universe gently pressing pause, so something inside you can recalibrate. You're not losing motivation. You're shedding a version of yourself that no longer fits. The numbness isn't a failure. It's a transition state. A signal that your nervous system is tired of living in survival mode, that your soul is quietly asking for a different rhythm. Not more productivity, not more achievement, but more resonance, more meaning in the spaces between actions, more emotional oxygen in your daily life, more room to feel without constantly explaining yourself. And here's the question I want to leave hanging in the air for you. If this emotional quiet isn't the end of your story, but the space right before something real begins. What part of you is being asked to soften so the next version of your life can finally reach you? Aquarius. There are seasons when closeness feels impossible, even when people are all around you. Not because you don't care, not because you are cold, but because something inside you needs silence more than connection. It starts subtly. You cancel plans without really knowing why. You answer messages later with fewer words, not out of distance, out of a deep, quiet need to breathe without being seen. There is a myth that being alone means being unloved. But what you've been living is something very different. It is a form of emotional solitude that teaches you how to sit with your own nervous system, how to regulate your own storms, how to hear your own thoughts without interference. And over time, you became very good at it. You learned how to calm yourself in moments when no one else was available. You learned how to make decisions without asking for permission. You learned how to hold your own fears without collapsing into them. This kind of independence doesn't come from confidence. It comes from repetition, from being the only one who could show up for you, again and again. So your system adapted. It stopped expecting rescue. It stopped waiting for validation. It built strength in isolation. And that strength is real. It's the kind that lets you survive transitions that would break other people. It's the kind that makes you emotionally literate, self-aware, and quietly resilient. But it also carries a hidden cost. When you've spent too long being your own anchor, your body forgets what it feels like to lean. Your nervous system associates closeness with responsibility, not comfort. You start to feel safer when you're alone, and strangely restless when someone gets too close. Not because you fear intimacy, but because intimacy asks you to release control. And you've spent years building a life where control was the only thing that kept you stable. So the universe did not isolate you to make you lonely. It isolated you to make you whole. It needed you to know your emotional shape without reflection, your values without consensus, your boundaries without negotiation. It needed you to meet yourself without witnesses. Because Aquarius, your soul is wired for connection on a high frequency. You don't just bond, you synchronize. You absorb emotional atmospheres. You mirror states of mind. You carry energy that was never meant to be yours. And the only way to reset that sensitivity is to remove external noise long enough for your inner signal to become clear. That's why this period felt long, not because you were stuck, but because you were being rewired. Your nervous system was learning a new baseline, not one built on survival, but one built on self-trust. You weren't being abandoned. You were being taught how to be internally anchored before the next level of connection arrives. Because the connections coming into your life now won't ask you to shrink. They won't need you to rescue or be rescued. They will meet you as an equal presence, not a caretaker, not a fixer. And here's the gentle question I want to leave resting inside you. If you've mastered being alone to protect your heart, what would it feel like to let someone witness you now, not as a project, but as a person who no longer needs to prove their strength? Aquarius. There is a very quiet kind of turning point that never announces itself. No celebration, no dramatic realization, just a soft internal shift, like the moment a river changes direction under the surface. You didn't wake up feeling transformed. You simply stopped attacking yourself in the same way. Your thoughts grew less sharp, less punishing. And one day, without marking the date, you noticed something gentle. You were no longer measuring your life against other people's clocks, no longer rushing to catch a future that never really belonged to you. There was still uncertainty, still unanswered questions. But the tone inside your mind had changed. Instead of pressure, there was curiosity. Instead of shame, there was patience. And that is how real change begins for you. Not with ambition, but with compassion toward your own timing. You began to sense that maybe you were not behind. Maybe you were simply traveling through a timeline that required depth before speed, understanding before achievement, alignment before visibility. This is something very few people are taught to honor, especially not in a world that celebrates urgency. But your nervous system was never designed for that pace. Aquarius, you are built to evolve in layers, internally first, externally later. So the moment your self-talk softened, your entire energetic field shifted. You became less reactive, more observant. You started listening to your body instead of forcing it. Your decisions became quieter, but more precise. You stopped asking, "What should I be doing by now?" and started asking, "What feels true to who I am becoming?" That question alone alters destiny. Because once you stop fighting your own rhythm, you begin to receive information that was always around you, but impossible to hear through self-judgment. Opportunities feel different now. Not louder, just more natural. They do not come with anxiety. They arrive with recognition, a subtle yes in your chest, a calm instead of adrenaline, a sense of rightness that does not need to be explained. And what's fascinating is that the external world often mirrors this shift weeks or months later. New people appear. Old patterns dissolve without conflict. Doors open where there was once silence. Not because you pushed, but because you aligned. This is the timeline most people never notice. The one where your internal permission precedes your external expansion. And it rarely feels exciting at first. It feels like relief, like finally being allowed to exist without proving anything. You begin to treat your life less like a problem to solve, and more like a landscape to explore. Mistakes feel less fatal. Delays feel less threatening. Even uncertainty feels softer, because it is no longer personal. You understand, maybe for the first time, that growth does not require self-destruction, and becoming yourself does not require urgency. The universe responds differently to a person who is no longer in conflict with their own timing. It brings experiences that match your nervous system, not challenge it. It introduces connections that feel stable, not chaotic. It offers paths that do not require you to abandon yourself. This is why the change was invisible, because it happened at the level of identity, not circumstance. And here is the question I want you to hold gently, without pressure. If your life has already shifted internally, what might unfold externally if you stopped trying to rush the evidence and simply trusted the direction you are already walking? Because Aquarius, sometimes the moment your life changes is not when something new begins, but when you finally stop standing in your own way. Aquarius. There is a quiet pattern that only reveals itself after long seasons of endurance. Not something written in books, not something anyone sits you down to explain. You only recognize it once you have lived through enough waiting. It is the strange way life seems to keep a memory of your effort, even when no one else does, even when the world felt indifferent, even when nothing appeared to move. There is a kind of cosmic accounting that happens in silence, not immediate, not dramatic, but deeply precise. The energy you spent holding yourself together, the nights you chose responsibility over comfort, the times you stayed kind while carrying exhaustion, none of that disappeared. It was stored. Not as reward points, not as karma in the simple sense, but as timing. Because for people like you, luck is not random. It is delayed alignment. You were never meant to chase outcomes. You were meant to arrive at the version of yourself that could receive them. That is why what comes next rarely feels like winning the lottery. It feels like recognition, like being met by life instead of pushing against it. You start noticing that things fall into place with less effort than before. Not perfect, but smoother, less resistance, less convincing, less forcing. The right conversation happens on an ordinary day. A connection forms without performance. An opportunity appears when you are no longer desperate for it. And suddenly, you understand. This is what people mean when they say timing is everything. Not because the universe rewards suffering, but because it shapes you into someone who can hold more without breaking. Someone who does not collapse when things finally expand. Someone who knows how to stay grounded when life opens. Aquarius, your luck does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with relief, with the sense that you no longer need to audition for your own life. You feel chosen, but not special. Seen, but not exposed. Supported, without being dependent. And this is important. Because the kind of fortune you are stepping into is not fragile. It is stable. It is sustainable. It does not require you to sacrifice yourself to maintain it. It is built on who you became, not what you demanded. That is the law nobody teaches. That long endurance rewires your nervous system to recognize real opportunities. Not the flashy ones, the real ones. The ones that match your inner pace. The ones that feel calm, not chaotic. The ones that do not take your peace as payment. You are not late. You are precisely calibrated. Life did not forget you. It was shaping you for a different scale of experience, one that requires patience, not speed, depth, not noise. And here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. Gently, without trying to answer it too quickly. If luck is already moving towards you, not as a surprise, but as a consequence of who you have become, what would change if you stopped scanning the horizon and simply allowed yourself to be present in the exact moment your life is finally ready to meet you? Because Aquarius, sometimes the greatest fortune is not what arrives. It is the fact that you no longer have to chase it. Aquarius. There is a moment that arrives quietly, almost shy, not with a sign in the sky, not with a sudden miracle, but with a simple feeling you cannot explain. You notice it in your body before your mind. A soft exhale you did not realize you were holding. A sense that something is shifting, even though nothing looks different yet. For a long time, connection felt like effort, like managing energy, like adjusting yourself to fit spaces that were never built for you. You learned how to be the strong one, the listener, the one who holds space, solves problems, absorbs emotions, and somewhere along the way, giving became your identity. Not because you wanted recognition, but because it felt safer than needing anything back. But something is changing now. Not in the world, in you. There is a subtle loosening happening. A quiet permission to be met instead of always reaching. To be chosen without explanation. To be supported without performance. The connection that is coming does not feel like chemistry. It feels like familiarity. Like sitting down in a room where you do not need to scan for exits. Where silence does not mean rejection. Where your presence is enough. This is not about romance in the dramatic sense. It could be a person, a collaboration, a conversation that unexpectedly opens a door. A relationship that feels calm instead of consuming. What makes it different is not what they give you. It is what they do not take from you. They do not drain your nervous system. They do not require you to explain your depth. They do not treat your sensitivity like a weakness. They meet you at your natural frequency. And for the first time in a long while, you realize you do not need to translate yourself to be understood. This kind of connection does not rush. It unfolds. It respects timing. It grows in places where pressure used to live. And here is the part that may feel uncomfortable at first. You will have to receive, not intellectually, not politely, but emotionally. You will have to let someone show up without trying to deserve it. You will have to sit in moments where support is offered and resist the urge to give something back immediately. Because your nervous system learned a long time ago that love must be earned. That connection requires effort, that being held is risky. But this one arrives gently, without debt, without conditions, without contracts written in invisible fear. It asks only one thing: that you stay open long enough to notice you are no longer alone. And maybe that is the real transformation. Not that someone enters your life, but that you finally allow life to meet you halfway. Aquarius, what if this next connection is not meant to fix you, teach you, or challenge you to grow? What if it is simply meant to reflect you, to remind you how it feels to be seen without explanation, to experience belonging without effort? What if the reason this connection changes everything is not because it adds something new to your life, but because it shows you how much you no longer need to carry by yourself? And here is the question I want to leave resting in your chest. Not to answer, just to feel. If someone were to truly meet you as you are now, without asking you to shrink or perform, would you recognize that kind of love when it arrives? Or would you instinctively push it away because peace feels unfamiliar after so many years of holding it all alone? Aquarius. There is a quiet kind of grief that does not come with tears. It comes with memories that still feel warm, even though the people inside them are no longer here. Not every goodbye was dramatic. Some of them happened slowly. Conversations became shorter. Energy shifted. Silence grew where closeness used to live. And you noticed it, even if you pretended not to. You told yourself it was normal, that people change, that distance happens, that life gets busy. But deep down, part of you kept wondering why certain connections faded right at the moment you were finally becoming yourself. There is something painful about outgrowing people who once felt like home. Not because they were wrong, but because they only knew an older version of you. One that needed more, one that adapted more, one that stayed smaller to keep peace. And when you started to shift inside, even subtly, even quietly, some relationships lost their place in your life without a fight. Not out of conflict, out of resonance. Because growth does not always feel like expansion. Sometimes it feels like separation without explanation. Like doors closing without anger. Like love that remains but cannot move forward. You were not abandoned. You were being redirected. There is a difference. Some people come into our lives to walk with us through survival. Others are meant to meet us in our becoming. But very few can do both. The ones who left were not mistakes. They were chapters that taught you who you were before you learned who you are now. And the reason it hurts is because part of you still honors the version of yourself that existed with them. But that version no longer needs to carry you. It is not betrayal to grow. It is not disloyal to evolve. It is not wrong to release connections that cannot breathe in your new frequency. Sometimes the universe removes people gently because keeping them would require you to stay the same, and you were never meant to stay the same. There is a sacred kind of compassion in letting go. Not pushing away, not blaming, just recognizing that love does not always mean permanence. Sometimes love means we met at the right time, and that time has passed. You do not need to rewrite the past to justify the present. You do not need to make anyone the villain. You only need to trust that your growth is not something to apologize for. Because the people who truly belong in your future will not be confused by your evolution. They will not feel threatened by your depth. They will not require you to explain why you have changed. They will meet you as you are, not as who you used to be. And here is the part that feels both heavy and freeing. The past did not leave you behind. It simply stopped walking with you. Not because you were too much, but because you were becoming more. Aquarius, if you could look at every person who once mattered and see them not as losses, but as bridges that helped you cross into this version of yourself, would your heart feel lighter? Would the grief soften if you realized that letting go was not the end of connection, but the beginning of alignment? And what if the space they left behind was not emptiness at all, but room for the life that is now trying to reach you? Aquarius. There is a moment in life that feels unreal, almost suspicious, not because it is dramatic, but because it is quiet in a way you are not used to. Things begin to move without resistance. Doors open without negotiation. People respond without hesitation. And your first instinct is not joy, it is confusion. You look around, searching for the hidden cost, the catch, the moment where everything falls apart again. Because for most of your life, progress required effort, relief required endurance, peace required explanation. So when ease arrives, it feels foreign to your nervous system. But this is what alignment feels like. Not fireworks, not miracles, just a subtle sense that you are finally walking with the current instead of against it. You begin to notice small things, an invitation that lands at the perfect time, a conversation that shifts your direction, a decision that feels obvious instead of heavy. Nothing feels forced, nothing feels rushed, nothing feels like you are proving anything anymore, and that is the sign. Luck, in its truest form, is not randomness. It is delayed reciprocity. It is life returning what you invested when no one was watching. The patience you practiced in silence, the boundaries you learned through loss, the self-respect you built in loneliness, all of it was stored, not forgotten, not wasted, just waiting for the right moment to come back to you. And now, something in you is finally stable enough to receive it. You are not chasing outcomes anymore. You are responding to opportunities. You are not trying to become someone. You are simply being who you already are. And life recognizes that frequency. You may call it luck, but it is really coherence. Your inner world and outer world finally speaking the same language. That is why it feels sudden. Because the real preparation happened years ago. In moments no one applauded, in choices no one validated, in healing no one witnessed. This is not a reward, it is a resonance. The universe is not giving you something new, it is matching what you have already become. And here is the quiet truth most people never realize. The reason this phase feels magical is because you are no longer resisting yourself. You are no longer arguing with your path. You are no longer negotiating your worth. You have arrived at the version of you that life has been waiting for. So when things begin to flow, do not ask why it is happening. Ask instead what inside you finally stopped blocking it. Because the luck that feels like it came out of nowhere was actually built in every unseen year you chose to stay awake, to stay kind, to stay honest with your own growth. Aquarius, if everything suddenly starts working, not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped forcing, would you trust that ease is not a trick, but a sign that you are exactly where you are meant to be? And what if this chapter is not about becoming lucky at all, but about realizing that you have been ready for this life long before it was ready for you? Aquarius, before you go, let me leave you with something gentle. Not a promise, not a prophecy, just a truth you can carry quietly with you. You were never behind. You were never broken. You were never missing anything essential. You were becoming. And becoming is not loud. It does not announce itself. It happens in the spaces where no one is watching, in the choices you made when you were tired, in the kindness you kept even when life felt unfair, in the way you stayed open in a world that taught you to close. That is why this moment feels different. Not because the universe changed, but because you finally did. You are not here to chase your life anymore. You are here to meet it. So if something inside you feels lighter tonight, if a part of your chest feels warmer, if you sense a quiet yes instead of another question, trust that. That is your inner compass realigning. And remember this, the future you are stepping into is not asking you to become someone else. It is inviting you to arrive as you already are. Nothing to prove, nothing to rush, nothing to fear, just a deeper relationship with yourself. And from that place, everything else follows. If this message reached you, leave a comment and say, I am ready to receive. Not for me, for you. And if you are Aquarius, or you simply resonate with this frequency, subscribe and stay close. Because this space is not about predictions. It is about remembering who you are. The journey does not end here. It is just beginning to speak more clearly. Another message is already forming, and when it arrives, you will feel it. Until then, trust yourself. You are exactly where you need to be.